All right, high rollers, darts is on lockdown right now, but you've got to appreciate the efforts of the PDC with its at-home tour, Modus with its icon of Darts League, the remote Darts League, heck, there's even the online Darts League, all doing great work during this coronavirus pandemic, as is our guest today. He is a journalist, a sports writer who covers a wide range of things, snooker, tennis, athletics, the Olympics even, and yes, darts too. He's worked for a number of newspapers, joined The Sun full-time back in 2016 as a sports news editor, and is now Associate Sports Features Editor. Rob Maul, our guest today. Rob, appreciate your time. Thanks for being our high roller today.
No, thank you for the invitation. Much looking forward to the conversation.
It's at Rob_Maul on Twitter. You've got a wide range of background activities on your bio here. You love the sports, right? Tell me about your history.
Yeah, so I joined the Sunday Times at the age of 19, fresh out of journalism college after doing my A-levels, didn't go to university. And I worked on the paper and I learned off some tremendous journalists like David Walsh, Hugh McElvenney, Brian Glanville, the likes of Stephen Jones in this country, titans of their respective fields. And then I went freelancing. Well, I was made redundant, went freelancing at the age of 23. And then over the course of 9 years, I covered the London Olympics, which was a high point. Worked for near enough every national newspaper as a freelancer. And then in 2016, 4 years ago, I joined The Sun as a news editor. And in the last, 15, 16 months, I've gone back out on the road to cover the tennis, to cover the athletics, to cover the snooker. I would have been in Tokyo this summer. That's obviously another conversation for another day. That's not happening this year with the Olympics. And of course, darts is one of the sports that I've covered since 2011. And I just have been amazed, and we'll talk about it, I'm sure, how darts has just grown into this global sport over the last decade. But I feel very fortunate that I've been able to be paid to cover live sport. And even in this time of reflection, even in this hiatus that we have from live sport, I think it makes it more acute how fortunate I've been in my job.
Well, I know it's obvious you love the game of darts. I know you're fair in your reporting, sometimes critical of the PDC, the BDO perhaps too. Let's talk about the growth of darts, the ups and downs. I mean, this is a great game, and I kind of envy you because your job is really like a great hobby. You're out there doing something you love.
Well, I suppose it's funny because I do give up a lot of my time. My wife probably doesn't mind it sometimes, but I give up a lot of my time over Christmas and New Year. Sat at Ali Pally watching the darts, and then, of course, I would have, up to a couple of years ago, would have been at Lakeside for the BDO World Championships. And darts is one of those sports that a lot of people in Britain become synonymous with, the thud of a dart on a dartboard is synonymous with the jingle bells at Christmas. And I think a lot of us were introduced to it watching the action at the Lakeside. I obviously grew up in the late 90s watching all the great champions winning at Frimley Green. And as a consequence, the darts has become the sort of a must-see sport now over Christmas. Tickets, you can barely get a ticket for Ali Pally. The BDO has its problems. It will have significant problems, I fear, going forward in this particular, as we come out of lockdown in the UK. But darts is one of those sports that has grown from an amateur pastime, really, into this huge professional sport. And of course, with there being no tennis, no golf, no cricket, for example, darts has the opportunity now to really grab the limelight because it's one of the very few sports, if not the only sport, you can play to a competitive level and not have to be in the same room. And we're obviously seeing that, as you said in your introduction, about the PDC home tour at the Modus Darts League, the remote darts league that's also going on. People are playing now for money at a competitive level against each other. So that in itself will make darts become an even bigger sport, I feel, over the next couple of months.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned that because I recently wrote an article for maplecasino.ca, a gambling site here in Canada, about how darts is really the envy of the sports betting world these days because, yes, they've got these at-home tours and the integrity of the game is such, it's pretty good, right? That the players can be trusted to call out their own scores. There's no referees. And right now, I mean, darts fans can go to YouTube, can go to pdc.tv, they can watch their favorite game, and they can place a wager or two on it.
Well, of course, if you're a darts player, it would make no sense to stand closer to the board than the permitted distance or to stand further back, because you spend all your time practicing practicing at the particular correct distance. You do that when you go on the floor tournaments. You would do that when you go on TV. So it's not in your interest, if you're a professional, to throw, to cheat, basically. Now, some of the feeds on the PDC Home Tour have not been great quality. You have to accept that they are using their home broadband. They are using iPhones attached to various apparatus to record it. So, yeah, things will get better. We have to accept that there are limitations because this was very quickly set up. There are 128 players, and they are trying to get some live sport on, of course. But to be honest, I think the DRA, which is the Dance Regulation Authority, they are the sort of the disciplinary body, and they are monitoring this. So I think there is no suggestion that anyone is cheating. There was a furore only a day or two ago with Jelle Klassen, who is the Dutchman, the 2016 BDO World Champion. There were sort of selected images put on social media suggesting that perhaps his game shot, the double 20, had not actually hit the bed. And then, of course, it transpired there was cleaner footage of his home feed, which showed that he did, in fact, hit the bed. The DRA are not investigating it. The PDC came out in support of Jelle Klassen, and he obviously explained that he would use a second camera to film the footage. So we've had a bit of controversy, which actually proved to be a load of ball, actually, in the grand scheme of things, if you excuse the pun. But the bottom line is that I think at the moment the competition is fair, and there are no suggestions that any players are cheating. And of course, in a market space here in the UK where you cannot bet on live sport, the bookies are jumping on top of the PDC Home Tour and allowing punters to wage their money.
Well, with respect to Jelle Klassen, I tweeted out that it would take brass balls to cheat on a live stream.
Of course it would, because how would he know that anyone watching would not say straight away, hang on a minute, that's definitely not in? And I think also when you're in that heat of competitive action, which he was, and obviously Dan Dawson, the host of the show, is also calling out the shores. As you say, brass balls is the correct terminology, because you would need to, or brass neck even as well, to actually have that audacity to say that it wasn't game shot when, potentially tens of thousands of people are watching it. So that's why I was surprised by it. And when I spoke to my first call, actually, the journalist was to the DRA on Friday morning. I spoke to the PDC, and it seemed quite apparent early doors. And then obviously more footage appeared on, more stills appeared on social media, that this wasn't really a story. This wasn't perhaps the same level as the Coughgate scenario, which we may remember from a couple of years ago when Justin Pipe was accused of coughing. That did go to the DRA. It did go to disciplinary. He was accused of coughing to try and put off his opponent, Bernie Smith, in the first round of the PDC World Darts Championship. That, of course, got global attention, didn't it, if you remember that particular situation. We're not in the same league as that. But as I say, the point is the players do know that they are being regulated, and of course where there is money being bet, it has to be squeaky clean, of course.
Well, you alluded to the fact of the fantastic growth of darts over the years, and it really is an exciting sport to watch. It's got a bit of mind games. You mentioned Coughgate. I'm wondering what you attribute the growth of darts to, aside from the business and the marketing and the brilliance of Barry Hearn, but in fact the game itself. What is it about darts that makes it so great to watch?
Well, I think you have to, there's two sides of it, isn't there? First of all, it's the social side of it. When it's now been cancelled, or should I say it's been put back to the 2021, but the US Darts Masters was going to take place at the, I think it's Honolulu Theatre at the Madison Square Garden. And Fallon Sherritt was being promoted as the next big thing coming over to darts. And the actual branding for that in the US was it's sport's biggest party. So I think the people like Barry Hearn, the PDC chiefs, they're not straying away from the fact that, yes, this is a good night out. And of course, over Christmas, when I'm at Ali Pali, it's full of people singing, dancing, shouting. Not all of them are watching darts. A lot of them are there to have a really good time. So it's marketed as this sort of party-themed sport. But then, of course, like any other thing, when you get high-level sport, and I do consider darts a sport, when you get it at that high level and you get very world-class operators, and we've seen some tremendous matches at the PDC, we've seen a lot of dross, but we've also seen a lot of decent matches at the World Championship, you really get into it. And I think that the game's growth is because the standards have improved. I think, obviously, with Taylor disappearing, Phil Taylor, a couple of years ago, there was a concern whether the popularity would decrease. But I think Van Gerwen has stepped into that role. Obviously, Peter Wright winning the World Championship this year gave it a British appeal as well. But I think the game's growth as well, there's a real... People want to watch the darts to have a good time, but they're also falling in love with the actual characters and the plot lines and the good quality of sport. Now, if you compare it to the BDO, of course, which we could spend a whole hour talking about the problems there, that lost a lot of its top stars. It lost a lot of its quality. And if you offer a product, for example, which is of a poorer quality, people are not going to be drawn to it. So you do need high standards of achievement, I think, to get the crowds in.
Well, you talk about true sport and the essence of it. When they are at their top level, the highest caliber, the ebbs and flows, it's so fun to watch. You got them responding and countering with big scores and then the big outshots and, of course, the big reactions. I love it all. I want to talk about some of your recent darts articles. The reason I reached out to you, though, is your piece on Tony Adams, the legendary footballer who is now advising darts professionals on mental health and emotional issues. You kick off the story by saying, Tony Adams played a lot of darts during his time at Arsenal. The problem, he used to drink 8 pints on the Yockey, and we kind of alluded to it there. A party atmosphere at the darts, alcohol and darts, a long history, right? Perhaps even, dare I say, a love affair.
Undeniably, the two are linked, of course. I mean, Tony Adams, for your audience, of course, was the Arsenal captain. He was captain of England, of course. He developed a real alcoholism problem. He was boozing too much. This was at an era, football in the UK or soccer for an international audience, where you could train and then you'd go down the pub for several hours afterwards, and he would be on the Yockey throwing darts. But of course, in his mind, being an alcoholic, he wouldn't actually realise that he was drinking 8 pints over the course of 5-6 hours playing darts with his mates, or maybe snooker on a Thursday. Now, he became sober. He's become clean from that. It saved his life, actually, talking out and reaching to people. And when he wrote his autobiography in the late 90s, he put and invested about, I think, £170,000 of that advance, or the money he received for writing that, into the Sporting Chance Clinic. He set it up in September 2000, and essentially it's helped people of a similar nature. It's helped sportsmen and women that have had, battled depression, that have battled mental health issues, that have battled gambling, alcoholism, drug abuse. And as part of that, they've reached out, and with the Darts Union, the PDPA, they have come on board in this lockdown period, which undeniably for everyone is a real challenging time, if you like. Everyone is dealing with it in different matters, perhaps. Some have their families, some are deprived of earning money, some are perhaps got real crisis going on. And what he's offering to dance stars is a 24-hour helpline. He's offering them the chance to talk to qualified therapists, to just unload and get things off their chest. And that was the essence of the story. We became aware of Tony Adams, who, to our readers here in the UK, is a huge figure, if you like, represented his country with distinction, as I said, won several honours with the North London club Arsenal. And that link we wrote about in the paper on Friday. And it was just quite an interesting story, how he is reaching out and offering help to people. Because when I spoke to Barry Hearn a couple of weeks ago, he made an excellent point that, darts players are self-employed. They don't earn any money unless they're playing the sport. It's not like they have a regular salary, for example, from a company. So therefore, this PDC Home Tour has given them a slight bit of opportunity, if you like, to play sport. But of course, that's not to say they still might not be struggling. So the Adams Sporting Chance Clinic, which is well established now, gives them that outlet.
Well, I think it's great, and what an effort by him. In the article, he says, quote, "Part of my drinking story is darts for my local pub team." And I'm glad you clarified his background, because I'm a hockey fan, okay, in Canada. I don't know much about the football, but I looked him up, and man, oh man, what a career. Quite a player, legendary center back at Arsenal, the captain, 4 division titles, captain of England. They've got a statue of him, went from coach to manager. He earned his MBE, so when he speaks, people listen, right?
Of course they do. Absolutely. I mean, as I say, it's more his, there's two sides to his story, of course. There is there's the footballer, what he achieved as a footballer, how alcoholism was part of that journey, and of course what he's done since retiring. And as you say, he's left a tremendous legacy because he is helping people. His Sporting Chance Clinic is making sure that there is a place to go for someone that is really struggling. Because, we all have our own mental health challenges, of course. Some are stronger than others. And I think this lockdown is really testing us all. And I think to have those therapists available is a really key thing. So, yeah, I mean, if you speak to any football fan here in the UK, Tony Adams is and remains a huge name, basically. And he was part of that Invincibles side in 2003, 2004, when Arsenal, under the tutelage of the French boss, Arsene Wenger, went the entire top-flight season without losing a match. And they were christened Immortality, if you like, the Invincibles, and he was a key part of that defence. So he has a significant place in English football history, but as I say, perhaps even more importantly, he's left a real lasting impression on people's well-being.
So you've got the 24-hour helpline through the Sporting Chance Center. People in all professions suffer from mental health. I know Luke Humphreys has been quite open about his issues at the Hockey. James Wade suffers. I recently read your article on Luke, and that was alarming. A panic attack so bad that he thought he was going to die.
Well, Luke Humphreys is, I think he's only 24, 25. He's a world youth champion. Clearly has got the future. He's got, the world at his feet, hasn't he, in the sport of darts. Could really go on and create some tremendous, achieve some fantastic things in this sport. But he's been quite open about his own mental health battles. He was playing Phil Taylor in an exhibition match on the Isle of Wight about 2.5 years ago. And he woke up the next morning, 5 o'clock in the morning, and his heart was racing, which was very unusual. And he got it checked out, and it was like heart palpitation. But essentially it was a panic attack that he was having. And it was never depression with him. It was just this anxiety. So he'd perhaps get on a flight. And when you're on a plane and the doors are shut and they're taking off, you almost sort of blank out the fact that actually I can't do anything now. The pilot, my life is in the hands of the pilot. I'm in this metal cylinder tube. I can't get off it. And normally you would just sort of blank that out. You wouldn't think about that. But if you've got heightened anxiety, which Luke did, you start replaying all that through your mind, basically, and it makes you even more worried. Your pulse starts quickening, your heart starts racing. So fair play to him for speaking so openly about it. And myself and a colleague, Mike Walters of the Mirror, we sat down and spoke to Luke not too long ago, and he actually spoke at length. It was actually Ali Pelly. He spoke at length about his difficulties. And I think the reason he does that, and the reason he is so open, is that people reading this, people seeing this story, can actually relate to it a little bit. And he's had people communicate to him. He's had people come up to him and say that they have also experienced similar difficulties, and he responds to them all. And I think he's a very admirable young man. And, it's very easy for us to say, hang on a minute, you've got real anxiety problems. How on earth are you able to get up on the Ali Pali stage in front of 3,000 people and play? Because don't forget, this guy got to 2 straight quarterfinals, didn't he, in his very early part of his career. But that shows his resolve. That shows that actually on a dance hockey, he can perhaps express himself a bit more than he would normally. So I think fair play to Luke, and I'm sure there'll be great things to come, as I say, as we watch his career develop.
Yeah, he is a terrific player and clutch when it matters. I mean, the nerves don't get to him, so it really is alarming that a guy like that who performs so well suffers from some of these issues, and as you mentioned, these issues magnified during quarantine.
Well, yes, they do, and I suppose we only know about individual people's issues when they're prepared or willing to talk about it. As I say, I mean, this is an unusual situation across the globe. I'm not 100% sure of how America is battling this. I mean, we hear certain things from Donald Trump, messages across the Atlantic. I don't know how individual states are being governed, but certainly here in the UK, we've been in lockdown since the early part, the middle of March. Potentially, there's rumours that we might come out of this slowly in middle May. So that's a 2-month period. But as I say, the darts players have been very fortunate that they can still practice at home. Like, for example, if you're a snooker player, you may not have a snooker table at your home. If you're a badminton player, you can't go to the badminton hall. If you're a swimmer, you can't go to the swimming pool because they are closed under government restrictions. So for darts, they're very fortunate. They can keep their hand in, and they can keep practicing, and they can keep putting their name out there. But that's not to say that players aren't struggling with various things. James Wade is another who, it's well documented, has explained that he has bipolar and takes a number of different pills, medicine, to try and suppress that, to try and sort of keep him on an even keel. And he's been very open about talking about those issues over the last decade or so. So I always commend someone when they do that, because anyone reading our newspaper, anyone listening to your show can hopefully relate to that if they've got their own struggles in life.
That's some great information right there. Just a few more questions. I know I told you 20 minutes. We're running a bit over. You recently did a story on Bully Boy. Talk about practice at home. A mini zoo, is that right?
He's a top lad, he was, Michael Smith. He got to the world final, didn't he, a couple of years ago. A funny story to digress a little bit. He actually was playing Michael Van Gerwen, and I remember that he sort of gave it away in the first couple of sets, really. That's where he lost his momentum. And he ended up breaking the bones in his left hand because he smashed and punched a dartball backstage in anger that he hadn't performed on the test. But he's a real character, Michael Smith. His name's Bully Boy because of, I think he used to look after cows on a farm, I think, when he was a teenager. But because of the wealth that he's accumulated over the course of his darts career, the successful one of that, although, of course, he's still waiting for a key TV final victory. He told us, the dad of two, that he has 5 dogs, 3 rabbits, 2 tortoises, and koi fish. So he is almost like the darts version of Dr. Dolittle. He's got this almost zoo that he's assembled in his lavish St Helens home. And when he plays in the PDC home tour on Saturday evening, he said he's going to basically stop the dogs coming in, stop all the rabbits running across the screen, and he's going to try and sort of cocoon himself into his sort of man cave, if you like, so he can actually play on the street. But I loved it. I mean, I work for a tabloid newspaper in the UK, and I love getting behind the skin of, these top sports stars, whoever they may be, whether it's a Roger Federer or a Usain Bolt or a Michael Smith. It's just trying to know what makes them tick. What are they like at home? And obviously, the one thing this darts league has certainly shown us is a sort of through the keyhole, really, of people's homes. And for poor Michael Smith, he does have a sort of a farmyard, it seems, that he has to try and keep quiet for a couple of hours.
Right. It's been nice to have the inside, behind-the-scenes look. You also recently wrote an article on Lisa Ashton. Now, we've seen women strut their stuff on the PDC of late. Fallon Sherrick, Lisa Ashton, both lighting it up. Lisa's got her tour card. She can really do some damage now, and I'm hoping she does.
Well, we spoke about, darts being one of the very few sports you can play in this lockdown period. And of course, darts is unique. It's one of the very few sports, I can think of snooker, maybe fishing, equestrianism, where you can actually have a mixed sport. And there's no reason now, as we head into the 21st century, over the next 10, 15, 20 years of my journalistic career of people watching darts, that we will have lots more women playing on the circuit, and it almost becomes an irrelevance. I think at the moment there's still a novelty factor to a female player playing in the high tournaments. We saw that obviously at the World Championships in December. Now, we spoke to Fallon Sherrick a day or two before she went out there and played Ted Evans, and she was magnificent, just the way she handled the occasion. The crowd were clearly on her side, clearly against Ted Evans, a gentleman by all accounts, how he performed in that defeat, how he reacted after the loss. And obviously Fallon Sherrick won that match. And, when people like Billie Jean King are tweeting about darts, something's gone completely crazy in the sporting world. The axis has completely gone on its head. And Fallon Sherrick ended up beating Mensur Silovic. She then lost to Chris Dobie in the 3rd round. And that obviously set the template. And then, of course, in January, an equally impressive achievement, Lisa Ashton came through Q School. She got enough points, secured her spot. Mikuru Suzuki also, I should point out, came close to winning a match at the World Championships. But on Lisa Ashton, who has won 4 world titles, don't forget, she's a very established player in her own right, has managed to get onto the PDC circuit. And when I spoke to her for the article, she said that she's been well received, well welcomed. There's no suggestion of, I don't want to lose to a woman. Even though players might think it, they certainly don't say it. She's been well received, and I think she'll go from strength to strength. Now, of course, I think she's 48, 49, so she's only got perhaps another 10 years left. If she was perhaps 20 years younger, she could go on and perhaps do it for several decades. But I think the likes of Fallon and the likes of Lisa and Mikuru are basically saying to young girls, there is a future for you in darts. And I think perhaps more girls than we realise are actually asking for dartboards in their birthday and Christmas stockings than we probably realise.
Absolutely. Good points, and I hope it happens. I want to see a woman win the world championship. Point blank, I do. Now, a couple of darting birthdays today. The late, great Eric Bristow would have been 63, and the world number one, Michael Van Gerwen, 31 today. Different eras, the same greatness, both legends.
When I was a freelancer, I was asked by my colleague, Mike Waters, he was covering the cricket tour in New Zealand, so I was freelancing for the Mirror, and I had to ghostwrite Eric Bristow's column for several weeks. It might have been about 10 weeks throughout the Premier League season. So he was being asked every Thursday. I would ring him up. He'd say, "Call me on this particular day," and there was no nonsense with Eric. You'd get 10 minutes, and you'd ask about all the 5 matches in the Premier League, and there was no waffling going on. It was like once you got the sense of Eric that once he'd finished what he wanted to say, and he was brilliant. He was fantastic copy. He would give you some tremendous observations and sound bites. But that was it. You didn't want you hanging around on the phone. He was a tough man as a dance player. Fantastic legacy, obviously, the way he played the sport, the confidence that he winged on that hockey, of course. How many men in this country could go to Market Harborough, which is a very nondescript place, you could argue, in the middle of this country on a Tuesday night and get perhaps 250 people sell tickets and come and watch him play darts? It's a unique talent, and that shows you how important and how influential darts was in the 1980s. Just the name Bristow, I think people in this country, in the UK, and perhaps globally, would be aware of what you're talking about when you say the word Bristow. Very sad that he died at 60, very premature. He was a key figure on the scenes. Whenever you go to Ali Pali, I'd walk from the car to the media entrance. Often you'd see Eric outside puffing away, and certainly he'd be in the players' lounge with a pint of Guinness. He was a huge figure, always working, always involved in the circuit. He won 5 world titles before, of course, dartitis. He played a tremendous role in the emergence of Phil Taylor, and of course we know how that transpired. Now, Michael Van Gerwen is a different era. He's 29. He has won more money in the last 10 years that Bristow and Taylor probably would have won throughout their careers because of the nature of when he's playing. But what sort of defines them is greatness, as you say, and I think we can call Michael, he's certainly becoming a great in what he's achieved. 3 world titles. Still hasn't defended the world title. That would be always accusation made against him. He obviously lost the final to Peter Wright this year. But I think you're right. They are defined by a birth date, and they're defined by what they're going to achieve. And I wouldn't be surprised if by the time that Michael Van Gerwen finishes his career, he might well have the same, if not more, world titles than Bristow. And of course, that would make him, if he does that and he achieves the figure over Barney, it would make him the most successful foreign player in darts history.
Well, I really appreciate your time. It's been fascinating stuff. Before I let you go, lastly, I see your pinned tweet, again, at Rob_Maul on Twitter. Your pinned tweet from 2016, you mentioned him earlier, Hugh McIlvaney, the legendary UK sports writer, 66 years in the business. One of your favorites, I suppose?
Well, I was very fortunate when I was on the Sunday Times. I was very much a junior reporter, right behind the ears. And Hugh McIlvaney, who is a title in our sports writing history, he used to write a column, and he asked me to come on board as a weekly researcher, essentially. And every week I'd be at a football match on a Saturday, and I'd get the phone call from Hugh, and he would check a particular fact. He was absolutely pedantic to the capital P, but that was his great strength. He wasn't complacent about anything. He checked and he checked and he checked. He was thorough in his research and his application. A tremendous writer. His brother Willie, who sadly is also deceased, was a fantastic novelist in Scotland. And I spent a good part of or I should say the whole decade between 2006 and 2016 when he retired, near enough every week speaking to Hugh, having conversations about his column. He would tell me what he'd want. I would go off and research it and provide that research, and he would write the column. And every conversation was an education. This was a man that shook the hand of Muhammad Ali at the Rumble in the Jungle. This is a guy who saw all the great footballing legends, the George Bests, the Pelés, the Maradona. He was there in 1970 when Brazil won the World Cup. He was there in 1966 when England won the World Cup. I mean, I could spend hours talking about his great achievements. I don't need to do that. I think enough people know how fantastic he was in his writing, his observations, and I feel very fortunate and blessed It was very sad that him and his wife Caroline were due to come to my wedding last year. Unfortunately, I was in Australia for the Aussie Open when I got the text message before it was announced that he'd sadly passed away. And I'd only spoken to him a couple of weeks prior to flying to Australia, and it was very sad that we'd been deprived of McIlvenny earlier than he was. He was a tough man. He was a fantastic storyteller, fantastic writer, and a real accomplished gentleman.
Well, it seems like you had a great training ground. What an education. Thank you for the wealth of information today. Rob Maul, Associate Sports Features Editor with the Sun newspaper. Rob, thank you so much. Truly appreciate it.
No, you're welcome. Thank you.